whatever. In this episode of Fix It Bong Bong, we're in San Diego, and we're going to show you how to wire up an LS Swap 280z, 240z.
280.
280.
Yeah.
In this episode of Fix It Bong Bong, we're in San Diego, and we're going to show you how to wire up an LS Swap Z.
Yeah, buddy.
In 3 days. So here we are. Actually, we're no longer in San Diego. I'm here in Virginia, and Mike is somewhere else in the world. It's actually quite a bit later. We filmed this a year ago, and if you just saw part one where you saw us putting the engine in, that was 2 years ago. So we're a little bit behind, but you'll be happy to know the car is still alive and well in storage.
Yes.
Yep.
Still, hopefully, it still works.
But in this part 2 of the LS Swap video, we're actually going to go into more detail about the project and about wiring up the car, our pitfalls and struggles along the way. But before all that, a little bit more detail about the project and how it came to be. So, Mike, can you tell the viewers a little bit about the car?
Yeah, I bought the Z. Originally, did full restoration, I believe in 2012, 2013-ish. Bought it from the original owner, hadn't been running for 18 years, needed new fenders, complete restoration, took the paint down to the bare metal, had to weld some patch panels, rebuilt the original L28 in it, and could never get it running. Some of it due to my fault, some due to messing with 1978 fuel injection technology, also trying to run a bigger cam in it, and could just never get the engine running right. And eventually switching in a stock cam, trying to do some 1978 hacks by running a potentiometer to adjust the air-fuel ratios, and it's still always running leaner rich. And for as much money and time I was sinking into a 180 horsepower engine, a LS, the more I looked into it, just seemed like the reasonable swap to do.
Yeah, and I remember like talking about this, and we were always joking around like, yeah, I know the solution. Let's throw an LS into it. Throw an LS. And one day you called me up, and like, yeah, all right, we're gonna LS swap it. And I was like, are you serious? So,
yeah, some guy had a good deal, or what I thought was a good deal on it, and running and driving engine trans, the 5.3 aluminum block out of a Chevy Trailblazer. And the transmission turned out to be a boat anchor, and I ended up rebuilding the engine completely, but it's running now.
Cool. Cool. So, I guess, so it was 2 years ago, you know, me, Andrew, we came out, and like I said, if you haven't seen it, part 1, check it out. There's a time lapse of us swapping the engine in, and you ended up using an adapter. How'd the mounts work in putting that in the car?
So there's a couple different companies that make it. I was one with a new company out called Hoke Performance, ran one of their trial kits, and it was complete bolt-in. It was a new cross member with LS mounts, and then cut out the original 5-speed mounts and put in a cross member for a T56 6-speed mount. So essentially it was all bolt-in minus some cutting and hammering.
Okay, and if we can find that link, I'll put it in the description below. But so that's what we did for actually getting the engine and hardware mounted in the car. And as for the harness, we ended up using a PSI conversion kit and ECU through them.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I flew out to San Diego. You were living in San Diego at the time. I flew out. I had a couple days vacation. I flew out, and we knocked it out in 3 days. And the whole thing was we wanted to, without being invasive to the car's harness, integrate the new harness and the Datsun harness while removing a lot of the ancillary stuff that wasn't being used anymore. So the first part of this video is cleaning up the Datsun factory harness. So in this next segment, we remove the underhood Datsun harness, and I'm showing you how to basically strip out all the parts that we don't need. The fusible links, the Datsun alternator, I guess, equipment, the sensors like oil and pressure sensor, because we went with Speed Hut gauges, I think.
Yep, speed HUD, GPS speedometer, all electronic gauges. We cut out the factory fusible links, didn't need that anymore, didn't need any of the original fuel injection harness anymore. We shed quite a bit of pounds and quite a bit out of that harness.
Yeah.
And use the factory pins still.
All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove all the factory wiring that we don't need. So we had kind of a clean slate to tap into when we have the new LS wiring. So right now we're just going through and removing things like original coil or stuff we don't need. So step one. So what we're doing is we're splitting all of the wrapping here that came from the factory nice and slow so that we can remove things that don't need to exist, because some of this will actually still we'll be tapping into with the new harness. But like I said, whatever we don't need, we're going to be removing. So once we have everything integrated, we'll rewrap so it'll look relatively factory. So things on here like temp sensor, plugs, other things that we don't need, they're all going. Like I said, what we're doing is removing wires from the factory harness that we don't need anymore as we start to integrate the new harness. And what you want to do here is we have a lot of factory plugs. On one end we know what we don't need anymore. For example, like these fusible link wires, alternator wires. So what you want to do is to help identify or make it easier which cables you don't need anymore. Get your meter, hook it up to one end, have it set on continuity, and go to the other plug where you find all the other wires. So we're just poking around for it. Oh, there it is. And when you find the pin, this one right here, you know you can clip it. And once you clip it, you now know how to identify which wire you can pull out of your wiring harness. And you basically repeat that until all the plugs, all the things that you don't need are removed, and then you'll have a clean harness to start with when you integrate the LS harness. Alright, so after you've identified and removed all the wires you don't need out of the factory harness, you should be left with just the bare essentials. So what we have here is headlight circuit, horn circuit, your starter solenoid wire, turn signals and side markers, and your ground wires. And this is, again, firewall forward. And this is all the shit that we trimmed out of there we don't need. So we're pretty much ready to tape this up and do a rough fit. Everything behind the firewall we'll take care of once we have it mounted back in the car, and then we can start the integration with the new wiring harness, the LS stuff. Alright, so now once you've already cleaned up the wiring harness and removed everything, you can go ahead and start wrapping it back so it'll look kind of factory when you're done. Helps to have a vise. You do this the whole way up, and it'll look like how it did when it left the factory. Oh yeah. Alrighty, here's the wiring harness all cleaned up, taped and nice and clean, ready to be installed under the hood, and we'll integrate behind the firewall with all this stuff right here. Lunchtime. Alright, so now we got our modified factory harness installed back into the car. The second part is we need to figure out how we're going to integrate the new alternator, and the new harness together with the rest of the car and the factory wiring. So what's going to happen here is we're going to take two constant 12-volt positives from the battery going to an A&L fuse holder, and then we'll have one fuse supplying constant 12-volt to the original fuse block, another A&L fuse supplying constant 12-volt to the column, the column ignition switch. We actually have to install two new electric fans in the front. So to power those, we're gonna use a third fuse for that, supplying power to the fan relays, and we'll have an extra for if he wants to install an amp in the car later. Now, if you go inside the car, but basically, this was the original set of 12-volt constant wires going to the fusible links under the hood, which now probably actually shouldn't have cut those, but we'll run 10-gauge amp wire to that A&L fuse holder back here, This supplies power to the ignition relay and fuse block. This supplies power, no wait, this supplies power to the fuse block. This supplies power to the ignition relay. This supplies 12 volt constant to the column, and this provides 12 volt to the ignition switch. Alright, so now we got that cleaned up. The next part was pretty slick. We got the PSI conversion harness comes already loomed up, and all we had to do was just pass it through the firewall and then integrate the power connections behind the firewall. So we just pass, in this part of the video, we just pass it through the firewall and plug it into all the sensors in the engine, and then we deal with all the connections behind the firewall. And that went pretty seamlessly. And
I do remember we learned you can't run two temperature sensors off the same sensor because it was messing with the ohms, the resistance of it. So we had one temperature sensor for the ECU and then ended up running one for the speed gauge.
That's right, that's right. So tip when you're doing this, you cannot share temperature sensors with the ECU and the gauge. You do have to run two different sensors. So in this part, we pass the harness through and we get that plugged in. So we've got the hole prepped for the new LS harness to pass through where the grommet's going to sit. So this is the new LS harness. Now that we've already got the original factory one modified and already installed back in the car, we're going to take all this and we're going to put it through the hole that we just created in the firewall here. And put it through that hole right there. Alright, at this point, we're pretty much done with all of the engine or underhood engine wiring. We got all the sensors hooked up, all the coil wires. What's left is we got to wire in the high and low fan relays, and still have to hook up or make a battery to starter cable, and hopefully we can start this thing soon. We're preparing for first start here, so nothing's permanently installed. We just kind of have everything plugged in because we want to hear the car start. We're also pouring all the fluids in, and before we plug in like the spark plugs, the coil packs, we're trying to run the starter to build oil pressure so that when we do get the engine started up, it's not bone dry. So let's.
Yeah, that didn't work. I know they sell some aftermarket machines and tools to build the oil pressure, which we didn't have, so eventually we just gave up and started it anyway.
Yeah, eventually we got.
I had assembly lube. Everything. I mean, when I assembled the engine, I used assembly lube on everything, so I knew it wasn't going to be starting completely dry.
Yeah. So we eventually gave up, and we eventually started the car. Oh, one thing that is pretty funny is when we were trying to build oil pressure, we did find a fuel leak, and that was just due to like a loose clamp, I think. We fixed that, and then we were able to get to first start. The car started awesome. It had a
very loud, open tube headers, long tube.
It was really loud. It had a racing engine situation. I guess the throttle cable was stuck or something, and you corrected that, and then we restarted. We've got the dash temporarily installed with our fancy Speed Hut gauges. Alright. Don't mind the mess here. This is just, okay, so we haven't permanently trimmed or mounted anything yet because we want to make sure the motor will run and we've properly integrated into the factory harness, but let's see what we got here. This is the new harness. We have our fuel pump relay, ignition relay, obviously the ECU. We got our sensor wires running to the gauges. We got power wires providing power to the gauges. And in that rat's nest, we have hookup to the rest of the car electrical system. We got our makeshift fuel pump wire. First start, tell us what you're doing.
Filling the gas, drinking a beer. That's the top of my responsibilities and the most primary one.
I mean, car can't run without gas.
Or beer.
I appreciate
Hey Walter, what are we doing?
Alright.
He says he's
We've
inspecting the
exhausted
ground.
all of our gas options.
Alright, Mike, what are we doing?
We're adding the final oil.
Getting ready for first start.
Yep.
So
just gotta build some oil pressure hopefully, and
we're gonna
make some noise.
so we've done that by pulling injector and coil packs. So we're just gonna run it on the starter.
Fuel leak.
Fuel leak.
That's how you catch stuff on fire.
We are cranking to build oil pressure, and we built a lot of fuel pressure, and we're dealing with our first leak. Thanks for joining us. We should have the car started in probably 5 to 10 minutes.
Maybe.
Completely, totally.
The fire extinguisher is right there.
And just to show you how big this is, I'm a small guy, and
Josh is 6 foot tall.
this is what's gonna save that.
We got about 10 seconds before the house burns down.
All right.
Because remember, that's the one that can't. I mean, it says it's a 3-pin.
Yeah, I mean,
Start it.
start it. All right, plugging in injectors.
Oh boy, this is the real go?
This is the real
We're just gonna go for it.
Did you pump? You have to replug the fuel pump relay right now?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, you want these?
Well, I got mine.
Mine are somewhere.
Yeah, you're probably gonna want headphones or your hearing insertion. All right,
In
driver's
serious?
side, injectors plugged in. Driver's side, coil packs plugged in.
Do one for Josh.
All right.
What?
Too much throttle.
Too much?
That thing was. Didn't it?
Oh yeah, you're right. All right, go now. But did it not fire? Did we get oil pressure?
I don't know yet.
And then the next part of the procedure, I guess, was the 20-minute break-in to, what was that for, the cam?
For the camshaft, yeah, it's a brand new camshaft, and that was breaking in. And later we found out the LS factory computer requires a resistor with the speed hub gauges to get proper RPM readings. So when we were trying to break it in at 2,000, we're actually breaking it in at 4,000 RPMs.
Well, it sounded pretty awesome, but it was,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was,
Carbon monoxide.
yeah, I'm not sure if that was good or bad for the engine, nor I was not sure if the carbon monoxide was good or bad for us, but
Still working that.
needless to say, it was awesome, and it was quite a relief to hear it start after wiring all that stuff up, so.
I'll check for fuel leaks and stuff.
Here it goes.
We're gonna die of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Well, we got a smoke detector for that.
Probably that.
Where is it?
I don't know.
So we're at 67 and we were at 0. 70 carbon. What's the safe limit of CO2?
We don't even know the safe limit of CO2.
We're at 71. We're definitely above the CO2 safe limit.
Are we really?
Well, it hasn't started going off,
Yeah, we're fine.
but we're at 73 and rising.
All right.
Here, let me open this side one.
Once we heard it start, we took everything back apart because we wanted to, do the wiring nice and clean and permanently mount everything. So in this next clip, it's pretty late at night. I'm wiring the gauges permanently and...
All right, Josh.
What?
It's hour 36.
Is it hour 36?
I'm just assuming. It feels like hour 36. SEMA's tomorrow. We gotta leave at 6 a.m. when the car hauler comes. There's no dash. We're still figuring out. We had to overnight some spoon engines from Japan. and Harry only had 2 bottles of NOS, and we need 3. Do you think we'll make the deadline?
Totally.
Okay.
So we work all night and permanently cleaning up the wiring, trimming everything, making it nice, and inadvertently, and not at all surprisingly, I had made a bunch of mistakes. I'm not sure if it was connecting positive wires directly to ground or what, but in this next video you'll see we have it all together and we go for second start, and
Yep.
it doesn't start. And at
Oh,
this,
geez. I remember one of them was the fuel gauge was causing us problems and somehow grounding out too.
yeah,
Somewhere in the fuel gauge is grounding out and shorting all the gauges. Popping
Go for it.
pieces.
right. And at this point, we were, you know, I was supposed to catch the red eye back to Virginia. We had probably 4 hours left, and, you know, we just pulled an all-nighter, you know, wiring this thing back up. So I was like, you know, of course, you know, you're gonna make mistakes overnight, but now the pressure's on to, like, really troubleshoot this car and figure out, okay, how do we get this thing running again? Something I do remember doing was we wanted to, part of keeping the factory Datsun harness was we kept all the glass fuses. So something really annoying was we were running low on glass fuses as we kept popping all the glass fuses. So I don't remember if we had more glass fuses or by then we're just wrapping and foil and jamming them in there. I don't really remember what we were doing with that, but
We had them. They were just too big. I believe like the factory one we were popping was like a 10 or a 15, so we just started shoving 30s in there.
oh,
Very smart.
seems legit. That's better than shoving like 22 bullets or
Yes.
wrapping and foil in there. So, long story short, we eventually did track down, like what you said, there was a problem with the fuel gauge ground, and a couple other, you know,
Minor. After
yeah.
taking the dash in and out probably a dozen times.
Yeah, a bunch of simple mistakes. We got it running. Here's the test drive. That was a relief. And I had enough time to take a shower, and Mike got me to the airport, and that's about it. So after,
Literally down to the minute.
yeah, down to the minute. And I think overall the project was a great success. We got that done, and since then, Mike, you've had it tuned.
Yeah, so I needed to get it tuned. It's running really rich, not idling. Mainly because I am running a hodgepodge of LS parts, LS6 intake, bigger injectors, bigger throttle body, bigger cam. So the factory ECU on a factory tune could only do so much. So went and got a street tune. I'd actually like to take it back just to get the tune tweaked a little more. Sometimes when you're coming off hard acceleration, the engine will try to die and you just have to lift the throttle. The tune helped it out a lot, and I wouldn't mind taking it back for a little more tweaking of the tune and get a dyno, because still have no idea how much horsepower it's putting out to the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, in that initial test drive, I was impressed with how quick it felt. So, and I'm sure it's much.
Yeah, it should be making, I would think, about 350 at least to the wheel.
Okay.
So for a 2,500 pound car, hopefully.
Nice. And you are running an LSD in it.
Say again?
You are running a posi in the rear.
Yep. You got a limited slip installed in the back and 3 9s. And the next big thing I'll do is bigger axles, because it's got the factory U-joint style axles, so they're fine for as long as cruising on the street. But as soon as I try to dump the clutch, it's gonna explode. So that'll be the next big purchase, is new axles.
Nice. Cool. I guess that pretty much wraps up the overall project. So, update on the car, it's now back on the East Coast where he originally got it. You can look out for it maybe at a Cars and Coffee in the future in 2019 in the Atlanta area.
That's the plan. Yep. Right now, it's in storage. I'm out of the country for work for a little bit, and hopefully already getting a parts list going for when I get back. But hoping to get it tuned, get some track sessions in, drag racing, do a few more minor upgrades to it. But overall, the car has been running really well.
Awesome. If you want to see more pictures of the build, you can check out Mike's Instagram at
EleanorZ_78.
Awesome. And be sure to check out my Instagram channel at FixItBongBong, which is the YouTube channel. What else? Big thanks to PSI Conversions. Who did the mounts?
Hoke Performance.
Hoke Performance. Speed Hut gauges.
Summit. All the big guys.
Yeah, all the big guys. Summit, because I know we were on the phone with them with, we had questions. Oh, the transmission.
Oh, the transmission. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So we ended up, I bought, since the original T56 I got turned out to be a boat anchor, all the gears and everything were rusted inside, had standing water. Bought a T56 Magnum, and brand new, and when we went to install it, we realized that it is about 3 inches shorter than the factory T56, and I had no idea, and we had no idea, so had to call and get a relocated shifter to push it back 3 inches and cut the the shifter hole, making enlarge that a little. So normal T56 fits in there with no modification. Since the T56 Magnum was slightly shorter, we had to do a little modifying.
Yeah. But all in all, it worked out. And like I said, if you have any other questions, feel free to send me or Mike an email through his Instagram channel or shoot me an email directly. And I guess that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. If you liked what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again for watching.